Welcome into NFL Draft by Chat Sports. I am your host, Jack Sperry, and Mel Kiper Jr. from ESPN, the Godfather himself, released his latest NFL mock draft after the first week of NFL free agency today. So on today's show, I'm going to be reacting to it here. All 32 picks in round one are coming your way here in just a few short seconds. But first, make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you guys want more draft videos from us here at Chat Sports, we put out a video on this channel each and every day pertaining to the NFL draft. We got a bunch of great positional rankings, mock drafts, all that great stuff, getting you guys ready for the big day in Green Bay in just a few short weeks. So make sure you click that subscribe button right now. So we'll start with Mel Kiper Jr.'s number one overall selection, which is Cam Ward, the quarterback out of Miami. Now, Ward is expected to be the number one overall pick in this year's NFL draft. There was some speculation that the Giants and some other teams might be willing to come up to the number one pick, and there was some speculation that the Titans would be willing to move down from this selection, but it certainly seems like, based on what Tennessee was doing during NFL free agency, that they are gearing up to take a quarterback at the top of this year's NFL draft class. I think Cam Ward is by far and away the best quarterback prospect in this class, and this is the move that I would make if I were in charge of the Titans. Number two, not going quarterback here. They're rolling with Kenny Pickett there in Cleveland, and they're going to be taking Abdul Carter to pair with the $40 million man, Myles Garrett. Number two overall, the Penn State super freaky, twitchy athlete there on the edge. I think he's going to be a phenomenal player. I think pairing him up with Myles Garrett would be the scariest edge rusher duo in the National Football League. And because Shedeur Sanders does not go to Cleveland, he ends up going to the New York Football Giants. Now, whether the Giants land Aaron Rodgers or not, certainly seems like Rodgers probably doesn't want to go play for a team that just won 3 games last year. So, maybe it's Russell Wilson, maybe it's Joe Flacco, maybe it's Jameis Winston. But whoever their bridge quarterback is, they're still going to be in need of a franchise quarterback. Shedeur Sanders has been dealing with high-level pressure his entire life. He can handle the New York media landscape. Number 4, Patriots go Travis Hunter, falling all the way to number 4. He's the number 1 player on my big board this year with his ability to play both corner and wide receiver. He has told teams he wants to do both. And if you pair Travis Hunter up with Christian Gonzalez, that is an awesome cornerback duo, one of the best in football in my opinion. And then he can also come in and play some wide receiver in certain moments to help out Drake May. So shout out your guy. Let me know down there in the comments section, who is the best non-quarterback in this year's draft? And my opinion, the best non-quarterback is actually the best player in this draft, and it's the player we just talked about, Travis Hunter. But this will be the pinned comment on today's show. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. And when that happens, take advantage of that time. But let me know who the best non-quarterback is in this year's class. Number 5, Mel Kiper Jr. has Mason Graham, the disruptive defensive tackle out of Michigan, going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I have no problem with this. They do need help on the interior of the defensive line, and disruptive defensive line presences are difficult to come by. Number 6, he does have running back Ashton Jeanty out of Boise State going to the Las Vegas Raiders. We know Pete Carroll, their new head coach there at the Las Vegas Raiders, really does prioritize running backs, and he prioritizes running the football, and they have a pretty decent offensive line that they're still building there in Las Vegas. So they just got their quarterback in Geno Smith. Shedeur Sanders is off the board here, so that's not in consideration. Personally, I might consider going Tedorora McMillan here at number 6, and then going with Ashton Jeanty, or going with a running back of some other variety in probably on day 2 to fill out this role. But Jeanty is a dynamic playmaker, and if you put the right offensive line in front of him, I think he can be a star from the jump in the National Football League. Number 7, Tyler Warren, the excellent tight end out of Penn State, going to the New York Jets. Now, personally, I don't agree with this. I think that they're really going to be diving into the run game with Justin Fields being their new quarterback there in New York. Of course, they got Breece Hall, who's an excellent running back. And the one spot that they need to fill on the offensive line is right tackle. I think if Armin Membu out of Missouri is here at number 7, that will be the pick. But Tyler Warren, a really good tight end. And, of course, Aaron Glenn. And the new OC there in New York is Ben Johnson's protege. They use Sam Laporta, a tight end there in Detroit, quite a bit. So if they ended up making this move, it'd be far from the worst thing ever. Then at number 8, you got the edge rusher out of Georgia, Jalen Walker. Now Walker, I think that his tape is a little bit overstimulated in the market out there, and it's a little bit overhyped. But he's got incredible physical tools, and I think that I really liken him to Frankie Louvu, where he's going to be somebody that can be a blitzer, somebody that's going to be an absolute athletic freak. And of course, Frankie Louvu used to be there in Carolina, and they still need edge rusher help after letting go of Jadeveon Clowney and also Brian Burns. Or actually, they have Clowney there now. They let go of Burns. So Walker can be somebody that could be their number one edge rusher of the future, or maybe they'd play him on the inside and use him in a Frankie Louvu role. Either way, he's an excellent prospect with a high upside, and that's why Carolina's taking him here at number 8. Then number 9, this might be the most controversial pick in the entire draft for Mel Kiper Jr., and it is Jaxson Dart, quarterback out of Ole Miss, going in the top 10 to the New Orleans Saints. And I completely disagree with this pick from Mel Kiper Jr. They're bringing back Derek Carr. And, of course, you got Kellen Moore there as the new head coach. And, Jaxson Dart has been compared a little bit to Jalen Hurts, who just won a Super Bowl with the Philadelphia Eagles. But like Hurts, when he was coming out of Oklahoma and into the National Football League, Jaxson Dart has some things that he has to iron out. All right, so I think using a top 10 pick on him is very premature for the New Orleans Saints. Maybe if he's there in round 2, the Saints can think about using a draft pick on day 2 on him, but using that top 10 pick instead of getting a higher caliber of prospect at a different position, I think would be a big mistake for the black and gold there in NOLA. So let me know down there in the comment section, is Jaxson Dart worth a first-round pick and a top 10 pick at that? Give me a yes or a no down there in the comment section for today's pinned comment. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. When that happens, give me a yes or a no down there in the comments. Then we get to number 10 here, Michael Williams, the long-levered edge rusher out of Georgia, going to the Chicago Bears. I think if Genty is here at number 10, which is a possibility, that's who Ben Johnson is going to end up taking. But in this situation here, he goes to the Raiders at number 6, so they take an edge rusher to pair with Montez Sweat. No problem with that whatsoever. Then number 11 here is the San Francisco 49ers take Armin Membu out of Missouri. I kind of like the fit between Membu and the New York Jets, as we talked about earlier, but he would be a phenomenal fit as the new right tackle of the San Francisco 49ers. They desperately need help protecting Brock Purdy, and then also blocking for their running backs. Then Omarion Hampton, number 12, 2 running backs in the top 12 for Mel Kiper Jr. here. And, of course, Dallas, they got Javonte Williams, they got Miles Sanders, but is that really going to be enough to bolster the future of this backfield? You could certainly argue not, and Omarion Hampton is a complete package as a running back. You can play whatever scheme you want in terms of the run scheme. With Omarion Hampton, with his acceleration, with his size, his power, his contact balance, he could be a future star in the National Football League. And if they end up going 12, that might be a little bit earlier than people are expecting. But hey, Jerry Jones tends to do what he wants. Before we get into the rest of this Mel Kiper Jr. mock draft reaction, if you're a real one here at Chat Sports and you follow all these different channels that we have here at Chat Sports, you guys can get a Real One shirt of your own. You can get it in the color of your choosing. We got a bunch of different Real One shirts that you guys can get right now when you go to chatsports.com/Real One. We really do appreciate all of your guys' support. All the proceeds go to us here at Chat Sports to help us buy new equipment, to help us get new graphics for you guys to enjoy, and of course, to keep the lights on and pay the rent here at our offices. So we greatly appreciate all of your guys' support. So if you're a Real One, considering going to chatsports.com/Real One and getting your shirt today. Number 13, the Miami Dolphins going with offensive line here, Will Campbell. Now, the Miami Dolphins have not prioritized offensive line as of late, but I do think if Campbell's there at 13, he's going to be too good of a prospect for the Dolphins to pass up. Colston Loveland, number 14, to the Colts. Now, Tyler Warren, I think, could potentially land here as well. That tight end spot is really the last piece that the Colts need to give Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones a complete set of weapons there in Indianapolis. So Colston Loveland, very good receiving threat at tight end. Don't hate that whatsoever either. Number 15, Atlanta, once again, needs to go edge rusher this year. It seems like every year we're talking about edges, and Mike Green, I think, could be an absolute predator as a number 1 edge rusher for the Dirty Birds there in Atlanta. He's an awesome, awesome player on film, and I think that he'd fit really nicely in Raheem Morris's defensive scheme there in Georgia. Then we get to Will Johnson, a really good corner out of Michigan, going number 16 to the Arizona Cardinals, who definitely need cornerback help. If Johnson's here at number 16, I think they will greatly consider that. I think that Johnson is a really good player that is so good that he's kind of boring, which is why you haven't heard his name a whole lot during this draft process, but I think the Cardinals would be thrilled to get a future number 1 corner here in Will Johnson at number 16. Number 17, Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Now, Stewart is getting a lot of buzz, similar to what Trayvon Walker was getting out of Georgia a couple years ago before he ended up going number 1 overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Stewart, I think, is probably not going to go number 1, obviously, to Tennessee, but I do think he's going to go earlier than people expect him to. I do think he needs to work on a bunch of different things in his pass rushing skill set. Right now, he kind of only has the bull rush, but he's an excellent athlete. He's got excellent power. And I think that, the Bengals definitely need help on the defensive line. Stewart can provide that. The number 18, Nick Emmanwori. I think this is a little bit early for Emmanwori. I know that he had a perfect 10 out of 10 relative athletic score this year at the Combine. He's an absolute athletic freak, but I think that his tape is a little bit underwhelming. I don't love his pursuit angles. I don't love his ability to finish tackles at times in open space. Now, he's got versatility. I think that, Mike McDonald, the head coach there in Seattle, he really cherishes players like this, kind of like that Kyle Hamilton mold where you can move them around the formation, disguise pieces. McDonald really uses a bunch of disguises post-snap, and Emmanwori is certainly somebody that fits that mold. So it wouldn't surprise me at all. This is probably the ceiling for where Emmanwori can end up going, in my opinion, though. Number 19, Jahad Campbell, the inside linebacker out of Bama. Phenomenal player, pro-ready. It's very rare that you see a pro-ready linebacker enter the National Football League because it's such a difficult position to be pro-ready for. You have so many different responsibilities that you have to account for, and Bama teaches their linebackers better than anybody else in college football, especially over the last decade or so. So Campbell, a great physical talent, and he's going to be a ready-made leader. Tampa Bay needs a new linebacker to kind of take the reins from Levante David eventually. Campbell can certainly do that. Number 20, Tedorora McMillan. Now, I think that this is way too low for McMillan, all right? Because he ran in the 4.5s at his pro day, people are going to start comparing him to Drake London or Mike Evans. And, he does run a similar 40 time to Mike Evans, but I do think that he's a more fluid athlete and just an easier mover than Mike Evans is, who's more of a true deep threat. He's got more of a limited route tree. Tedorora McMillan has the whole route tree at his disposal. He's such a fluid mover, just like Drake London is. But unlike Drake London, he runs 4.5, whereas I think if Drake London, you asked him to run a 40, he'd probably rank in the 4.6s, somewhere in there. So he's a faster version of Drake London. I think he's almost like a younger version of A.J. Green. I think he's that good of a player, and I think that he probably ends up going top 10, not number 20. But if he can go here and pair him up with Bo Nix, that's a hell of a steal for Sean Payton and the Broncos. Then number 21, Mel Kiper Jr. has Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle out of Oregon, going to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Harmon compares his game, actually, to Cam Hayward, who is kind of on the downside of his career now. He's on the sun is setting on Cam Hayward's career. He says he wants to play 2 more seasons. Harmon can eventually take over his role alongside Keanu Benton. Then number 22, the Los Angeles Chargers and Jim Harbaugh take a receiver here in Matthew Golden, which would just be a complete anti-Harbaugh move. This is the perfect opportunity to take Colston Loveland if he's here, or, an offensive lineman or a defensive lineman. I think they're going to go classic Harbaugh with the trenches. They're still building this football team in the trenches, so I don't think they go Matthew Golden here. But hey, I can't say it's a bad move because Golden is an electric playmaker. Having that bolt on his helmet would certainly be fitting. Then we get to Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver out of Ohio State. Wide receiver starting to come off the board here to the Green Bay Packers. And, wide receiver is kind of a sneaky need for the Packers because people think, they got Christian Watson. They've got Romeo Doubs. They've got all these receivers there. No, Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs have serious injury concerns, guys, and they might have to kind of build for the future here. Egbuka is somebody that can play on the outside or particularly in the slot. He's a ready-made route runner to help Jordan Love kind of take his game to the next level, like that pick for the Packers. The number 24, Jahdae Barron. If he falls this far, I think that Brian Flores is going to absolutely, well, you guys can guess, but he's going to be very happy that Jahdae Barron is there sitting at 24 because he can play on the outside, he can play in the slot, and Brian Flores loves these players that you can just move all around. Josh Metellus is a perfect Minnesota Viking, and Brian Flores player. Barron would certainly fit that role as well. I think he'd be a stud in this Minnesota Vikings defense. Barron kind of reminds me a little bit here, guys, of Trent McDuffie, who the Vikings missed out on. They ended up taking Andrew Booth Jr. instead of Trent McDuffie a couple years back. But, like McDuffie, Barron can play on the outside. He can play on the inside at a very high level. And with kind of these versatile chess piece weapons like McDuffie, like Cooper DeJean, like Brian Branch panning out in the National Football League draft as of late, I think Barron will probably end up going a lot sooner than number 24. Number 25 here, Josh Simmons, the offensive tackle out of Ohio State, goes to the Houston Texans. Now, they just traded away Laramie Tunsil, so this is certainly something to keep in mind for the Texans, is offensive tackle of the future to protect C.J. Stroud. And, of course, Simmons is also an Ohio State Buckeye. And I think that his tape this past year was better than just about anybody else's in this class, maybe other than Will Campbell, but I project him more as a guard at this point than a true tackle like Simmons. So I think Houston would be really getting a slam dunk here with Josh Simmons if he falls to number 25. The number 26 here, Azariah Thomas, the physical, very long press man corner out of Florida State, goes to the Rams at number 26. They kind of run a lot of off coverage there in LA, so I don't really see where Mel is getting this fit from. But he does have long arms. He does play with decent instincts. It'd be a completely different defense from what he played there in Florida State, where they play more press man than any team in college football. It's a lot of off coverage. It's a lot of quarters. It's a lot of man match principles that will be brand new for Azariah Thomas. But hey, if they believe in the talent, why not make the pick? Number 27, Malachi Starks to the Baltimore Ravens, and they would love Starks to fall this far. I think that Malachi Starks is kind of similar to Cooper DeJean and Brian Branch, where people began to put them down their draft boards as the season and as the draft season went on because of poor testing or because of injury history or whatever the case may be. But, you just don't find football players as instinctive and as good as Malachi Starks is. Super quick feet, super decisive, great ball skills. He'd fit perfectly in that Baltimore Ravens defense. James Pierce Jr. Falling to number 28 here, edge rusher out of Tennessee. Of course, Detroit is looking to pair Aiden Hutchinson up with another top-end edge rusher. I think James Pierce, this would be an excellent situation for him to go to. He does have a little bit of character concerns, which is probably why Mel has him dropping this far in round 1, but he was a workout warrior in Indianapolis at the Combine, and he is an explosive player that has extremely high upside. Number 29, the Washington Commanders taking Maxwell Harrison, the cornerback out of Kentucky. Fastest player at the Combine this year at 4.28. He's got long arms. He's proficient both in man and zone coverage. I think he's one of the most pro-ready corners in this year's NFL draft class, guys. Maxwell Harrison, I think he's going to be a good pro from the word go. Of course, the Commanders just brought in Jonathan Jones from the Patriots in free agency. And they're probably going to move Mike Samerstill, who they took last year, put him back in the slot after playing him mostly on the outside his rookie season. Maxwell Harrison would certainly allow them to do that. Then number 30, Kenneth Grant. I'd be a little surprised if the athletic freak from Michigan falls this far down the board in round 1, just because you don't see guys at 340 pounds move the way that Grant does on film. I think that he's going to go a lot earlier here than 30, but hey, Buffalo needs help stopping the run. Kenneth Grant, if he falls here, I think that's a slam dunk pick for the Bills. Then we get to Calvin Banks Jr. out of Texas. Good player. I think that he can play on the left side. He can play on the right side. I think that Kansas City just needs help on the offensive line after losing Joe Thuney. Of course, we saw in the Super Bowl last year, even Patrick Mahomes can't survive if there's a constant wave of pressure. So getting some good help on the offensive line is important for Kansas City. Then we'll finish up the first round here from Mel Kiper Jr., post-free agency with Walter Nolan. Of course, Howie Roseman lands another explosive, dynamic, disruptive defensive line piece, right? Because Walter Nolan, that is exactly what he is. Now, he needs to develop a little bit more. He's a little bit raw, but the explosiveness just jumps off the tape. He's got one of the best motors I've ever seen from an interior pass rusher. That's certainly something where this guy's coachable. He's going to have that high motor. He's going to be a high-effort guy. Coaches really appreciate that. And if you pair him up with Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, and the boys they got there in Philly, watch out, because that pass rush is just getting started there in the city of brotherly love. So back to school here. Grade the mock for Mel Kiper Jr. this week. Give me an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F. I think it's fine. I think the Jaxson Dart pick is effing stupid, if I'm being completely honest with you. Why would you take a guy like – I have a round 3 grade on Jaxson Dart, by the way. Taking him in the top 10 would be the worst move the New Orleans Saints have ever made, in my opinion. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. A, B, C, D, or F. I'll be generous here to the Godfather here, and I'll give him a B+. Lots of moves that make sense, but some that I personally disagree with. But hey, that's life of an NFL draft analyst, right? Producer Coop, you agree with some things, you disagree with some things. We all have our opinion, so make sure you share yours down there in the comment section. Click that subscribe button. Join us here at NFL Draft by Chat Sports. Next week, I'll be releasing my first mock draft of the 2025 NFL season, or NFL draft season. If you guys want to check that out, make sure you click that subscribe button and tune in next week.